Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Legal Ease, the show that translates legalese into English. I'm your host, Yumna Bhana. Now today we're going to do something a little different, and we are just going to discuss very broadly and generally any interesting topics that are related to family law. And with me to deal with those issues is Mr. Hoossen Saida of Saidas Incorporated. Mr. Saida has a wealth of information regarding family law, and we just thought we'll tap into a little bit of his knowledge today. Mr. Saida, thank you for being with us once again.
Pleasure being with you again.
Let's start off with a very controversial topic, and that's the Muslim Marriages Bill. Now, they're very, let's say, diverse viewpoints on whether it's acceptable within our community, or whether it embraces the true Islamic values that we should be espousing as Muslims. But what specifically does this act, or the bill as it stands, deal with, and what are the controversial elements?
The Muslim Marriages Bill essentially came out of the inequity, the difficulties that Muslim people went through. You remember that for years and years, up to the present day actually, Muslim marriages are not recognized. So if there is a belief out there that Muslim marriages are recognized, let's understand this. The bill has not been passed, and Muslim marriages remain at the level at which they were. They are not recognized. Historically, this brought great hardship on Muslim people. My father, your father probably got married by Islamic law. At that time, they didn't go to the local marriage officer or register the marriage. The result is that we all grew up illegitimate, and we remain so in terms of the law, illegitimate. And until this marriage is recognized, we will remain so until some other legislation comes in there to recognize us. Against that background, there were people, the late Judge Ismail Muhammad and others, recently after that. The landmark decision was in a case where the late Judge Ismail Muhammad, there was a case of the road accident fund and one party. And in that case, Judge Muhammad decided, for the purposes of that RAF case, that the wife would be entitled to claim benefits for the injuries or the death of her husband. And that was the landmark decision. I think the momentum was gained after that, and therefore there was a move now to recognize Muslim marriages. Now this is the important matter. Muslim law is largely Quranic law, which means it is divine. Secondly, the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and two other elements. The analogical deductions by which we create. Islamic law is magnificent. Islamic law is beautiful. It is divine. It has been there for 1400 odd years because it was divine. The law as we understand in the rest of the civilized world is 200, 300 years old, 500 years old, 1000 years old, but not 1400 years old. And the beauty of Islamic law is that it makes provision for every aspect of your life. Economic, personal, domestic, business-wise, marriage relationships, divorces. That's why it is so beautiful. However, the new Muslim Marriages Bill, as envisaged by the legislators, is that it will in some instances not comply with the Sharia. That is the problem that we have. If it doesn't comply with Sharia, there are those hard and fast Muslims. All of us would like to think that we are firm in our faith. How will we embrace this new act that says, for instance, just as an example, that a judge, not being a Muslim, not guided by any Muslim assessors, will be able to pronounce a divorce for husband and wife. Now we know that in Islamic law, a divorce is only pronounced by the husband. Yes. There is no provision for the wife. But she can come with something called a fasakh, which must be, nowadays you need a qazi, you need the Islamic jurists, you need the Islamic thinkers, and you need the alims and the maulanas who understand Islamic law, the muftis, to explain things to us. The Muslim Marriages Bill seeks to bring into play the recognition of Muslim marriages, but it also brings with it very dangerous tendencies to undermine and to erode the Islamic values
With more
and
of
Islamic
a Western
law.
system.
Yeah, the Islamic, very much the Islamic system. So there is now a huge battle. The Jamiatul Ulamas of the Transvaal and Natal and the Muslim Judicial Councils have all made their contribution, and all are sound, valid contributions. There are some totally opposed to the bill and said, no, this is an un-Islamic bill. It will not stand the test. It will be taken to the Constitutional Court immediately and it will be thrown out. There are those who say, and there is a school of thought for this, that we should accept it, even with its flaws, and attempt to correct it in due course. Now, there is that school of thought that says, no, we don't want to be compromising ourselves in any way. Take the Muslim Lawyers Association in Johannesburg, of which I am a member. Their view is very simple. This is a bad law, it's a bad bill, we want nothing to do with it. There are others on the other side who say, wait a minute, let's not just reject it out of hand. A lot of good is in there. The Cape lawyers largely, and the Cape Muslim community, want to support it because they believe there is oppression against Muslim women. Now, I think we would not be honest if we didn't admit that there are things in our system that are not good for the women. But I don't think that this law is going to correct it. That's the problem. So, yes, the answer is, your marriage is not recognized. If you're married by Muslim law, it's not recognized. And this will lead us to another topic about how you should register your marriage, because there are certain benefits. So, whether we should accept the Muslim Marriages Bill, it's open for debate. It has been open for debate for many months. I heard that it might even be, the first reading might be passed in Parliament shortly. But it's an area in which one should tread very carefully. It's a minefield. And therefore, I think anybody you will speak to, unless those who are very bold and brave and who have a firm view, will say, yes, we are against or we are for. For the average Muslim person, like me, for instance, I will say, please, I need somebody to explain this to me. And who better than the mufti in your masjid? Or you have a friend, or you go to a lawyer and say, what is this all about? That's the story with the Muslim Marriages Bill in a nutshell. I must tell you, it's a minefield at the moment.
I imagine it is. Let's leave it there and go to the break. I hope that encourages you to go and read up a little bit more on the Muslim Marriages Bill and formulate an opinion on where you stand with regards to some of its clauses. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Legal Ease. We are talking general family law issues today. But just before the break, we had a brief discussion about the Muslim Marriages Bill and what it entails and where some of the controversies in that bill are stemming from. What we're going to go on to next is something my guest, Mr. Hoossen Seda, mentioned in the earlier segment, and that is the issue of having your marriage registered. We have touched on this in a previous show, but just to emphasize the importance of having your marriage registered, how you go about doing that, and what different marital regimes are available. Mr. Seda, over to you.
Historically, because we Muslims didn't register our marriage, we didn't enjoy certain benefits. If you register a marriage, for instance, and you have a deceased estate, you are given a certain benefit, discount if you want to call it, and so on. Registering marriage is now a requirement. Whether it comes in the new Muslim Marriages Bill or whether it will come now, you should register your marriage. I think that is absolutely imperative. First of all, it brings the legality of any children born of the marriage. The stigma of being an illegitimate child does not apply. And it takes care of a number of other problems, and I see no reason why it shouldn't be done. Now, a marriage by Islamic law is one where the wife owns her own assets. From 1400 years ago, from the time that the Prophet was there and up to the present time, a Muslim wife owns her assets. It does not form part of the assets of the husband. Similarly, the husband's assets do not form part of the assets of the wife. So if you want to marry and you want Islamic law to prevail, then you will go and get married by ANC, by anti-nuptial contract. The other marriage is the community of property. Community of property means what it says. We are in community, we share everything half and half. So when you marry in community of property, whatever assets you have, whatever you bring in, whatever he brings in, eventually is divided in half, assume at the time of the divorce or at the death of one of you. It will be half to you automatically, you are owner of. But by ANC you will have your own assets, which means that you must make your own will, which means you must open your own bank accounts, which means that it would be wise and good for you to administer your own affairs. If you had money, as opposed to your husband's assets, you would go to the bank, you would decide where you would invest it, you want to buy a property. And Islamic law allows a woman to be a boss. She can do whatever she wants. She can become mutawalli of a masjid, a trustee of a masjid. So economically and business-wise, there's nothing to prevent her from being an independent person. And this starts from getting married out of community of property, which means you go to a lawyer, he draws a contract. It's called an ANC contract. It's a standard contract with 6 major clauses. They sign that, and that's the marriage. The marriage is governed by anti-nuptial contract. The new concept now is that it is with or without accrual, which means that at the time you come into the marriage, everything is divided, it's separate, but from the date of your marriage, we will share what we earn. So if you're in business together or you buy anything together, then that becomes accrual. And at the divorce of the parties, then you share the accrual.
Okay, that's basically what, in a sense, the profit of the marriage, the actual marriage, not what you brought in prior to the marriage.
Exactly. That it's important that the intention at that time was that we would share this. That intent, niyyah in Islamic law, again has the same meaning. The intention was that whatever we accrue, profit and loss. So if there is a loss,
you'll share that loss
you will
as
share
well.
that as well. Yes.
Sure. Mr. Seda, now you're talking about registration. So we've gone through the process of getting the anti-nuptial contract drawn up, if that's the route you want to go. If you don't go the anti-nuptial route, your marriage is automatically in community of property.
That's right. And the formality is very simple.
Yes.
You just go to the magistrate's court, take your identity documents, take a ring with you, find a witness if you want to take somebody with you, and the magistrate will perform the marriage. Wait for a while until he's free. It takes 5 minutes. And you put the ring on, you are now married in community of property. But if you want to marry out of community of property, you have to go to a lawyer. He has to draw an anti-nuptial contract which is signed. He will give you a letter, and when you go to the magistrate to get married, he will now note that this is a marriage by ANC, out of community of property. So yes, very simple. There is no charge for a marriage in community of property. It's free. The magistrate will do it, and there are marriage officers now in the Muslim community and in other communities as well, who will often come to your home. Make sure that you have samosas and cakes and tea and what have you, and have a little celebration when he marries you, and then he goes away. It's a marriage in community of property. No other formalities required.
Now, as a matter of interest, assuming you've been married several years, an Islamic marriage, so say 10 years, you've already been married. Are you able, by way of example, you want to go ANC with accrual? Are you able to backdate that to start from the day that you entered your Islamic marriage, or is that not an option?
Well, for purposes of registering this marriage, it means you've never been married. And Islamic marriage is not recognized. So if you're married for 10 years, say, by Islamic law, you can go tomorrow and do an ANC. No problem. No problem at all. It starts from that day. The civil marriage starts from that day, as opposed to your Islamic marriage, which is 10 years old. So there is no problem there. There's no difficulty at all. So it starts on that day. Once you register your marriage, the civil marriage, it begins on that day. So there's no other formality to comply with.
Okay.
So it's simple enough, not difficult. There are things that one must be careful about. When you do an anti-nuptial contract, at that time it is important to say to that lawyer who's drawing your contract that I have come with so much into this estate, and that is mine. And he will say the same and say that I have come with so much, and it is recorded, so that any accrual that derives later is easily identified. So there's no problem there. You were mentioning something about the, you said something about the marriage itself. The formalities are not of any great issue. The antenuptial contract must be drawn by a legal person. The marriage is performed by a marriage officer. He's appointed by the state to come and perform marriages. So those are the formalities, no other great difficulty about it. Marriage is like drawing a will. Do it. Do it, because once you leave something and die, there will be somebody who will have a dispute about what belongs to who. So
and we see it all the time.
You see it all the time, and people, well, very often people don't make a will. They believe that if I make a will, I might die. It doesn't happen that way, but it's important. Make a will. It's a simple document. It can consist of a one-page will.
Mr. Seda, let's discuss this when we come back after the break.
Very good.
After the break, we'll talk about wills and some other family law issues. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Legal Ease. I have with me in studios Mr. Hoossen Seda, and we have been talking general family law issues. Just before the break, we started talking about wills. Again, it's a topic that we've touched on, and again, I want to draw the importance of all the viewers to having a valid will drawn up, so that in the time of your death, which is coming for each one of us, it's clear what should happen to your assets, and there's no room for dispute. Mr. Seda, I'm sure you cannot stop talking about the virtues of having a will to avoid the kind of disputes we do see every day.
It's so true, because if you see the instances where people didn't leave wills and they died, men and women, and the misery this will cause, because if there is no will, your estate has to be reported as an intestate estate, which means then that it will be distributed in terms of the law of this country, which sets out that if there are any surviving relatives, they will inherit in certain proportions. And yet drawing a will is the simplest thing in the world. One can do it oneself. Take a pen and paper and say, I so and so, this is my last will and testament. I appoint Mr. X or Mrs. X to be the executor, and I appoint so and so to be the beneficiaries of my estate. Full stop. It can be a one-page will. There are one-page wills you can buy from the stationery shops. It's not Islamic. No. But if the Jamiyat Ulama specialize in having a will, you buy it. I think it costs something like 30 or 35 rands today. But it saves you so much of trouble. It has all the relevant clauses, but having that will is of paramount importance. A will is like a suit of clothes. It must be tailored to your requirement. So it is better to go and draw a will by a professional. We are lawyers, and we know that to get things done properly, go to a lawyer. If you have a family problem, go to a good family lawyer. Your commercial problem, go to a good commercial lawyer. A family lawyer will draw up a will for you. It's not difficult, it's not expensive. It will mean sitting with the lawyer for about an hour, discussing what your assets are, discussing your relations, who you have, and draw a will. The important issues to remember, there are only two important issues in the will. One is to nominate an executor, the person who takes charge of your estate after your death. The executor should be wife and children, or husband and children. They are the closest to you, and they should be of an age where they won't die before you. Secondly, they should not be living in Canada and Australia and the UK. Yes. Because then to report an estate from there, it will take you years. So appoint people closest to you and appoint people that you trust implicitly. because they take charge of your affairs. And winding up an estate means exactly that. They go to the bank and find out how much money you have. They get your title deeds and see how much property you have. They look at how many cars you have and what is in the bank account. They add it all together and they distribute it according to your will. Islamic law is very simple. It already prescribes what the proportions will be. There are those who want to make wills on their own and give bequests. Bequests to say, a servant in your home, or a gardener, or a good friend, and you make bequests. You say, I leave this to... Sometimes you know that in Islamic law, adopted children don't automatically inherit. So you have to make a bequest in your will for that child,
yes,
male or female. So a will, yes, essential, do it, don't leave it. People go for Hajj, they draw what is called a traveling will. And then they come home and forget about it. But it's nice to... It
yes,
is not nice, it is absolutely imperative that you have a will.
Definitely.
Because it saves trouble for people who have to wind up after you've gone.
Yes, and I mean the reality is that you die without a will and it is going to be divided intestate, and that may not really benefit anybody that you had hoped to benefit.
Well, there is the added problem that if you don't make preparation for a will, nobody will know what your assets are.
That's another
Today you have invested in a certain syndicate, or you've invested in something and nobody knows about it, and now you die without making a will and you don't leave these details, those assets don't come into your estate. So yes, it's good to have a will. It's absolutely essential.
Absolutely. I want to come back to a different topic which we covered in a previous show, and when we were discussing children and divorce. And you mentioned to me when we were just having an informal discussion the situation we have developing where we have so many foreign nationals within our borders that often have children either with local people or with their spouses that have also come from foreign lands, and then they take those children, either leave them behind here or take them with them overseas. What situation are we dealing with?
This is a classic situation that is at the moment in this country. In our own communities, we will find people from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Egypt, North Africa, Tunisia, Morocco, Egypt, and so on, and then the Somalia and Ethiopians. Now, in the old days, we had what is called influx control. Miners came to work in South Africa. They came from Sotho land, as it was known then, or Swaziland, or from Zimbabwe or Malawi. They came here single. It was unnatural to think that they would survive here without some relationship. So they married here. And then they had children here. And then when their contracts expired, they went home. Created problems. Sometimes they went home, now they were married here and married there as well. Similarly, in this situation, we have now the foreign communities in our country. They come and very often they will marry amongst themselves, which creates no problem. If they marry in South Africa, it will be in terms of South African law. But very often these marriages are not registered. There is a union, there is a nikah. A Bangladeshi man might marry a South African. And after a while, when if they have to divorce, or if there are children, he might say, let me take the child to my family in Bangladesh, and you don't see him again. Or you might see him again, but you don't see the child. And this is now a living problem. So many children are born here of foreign nationals from different countries. Like life, they cohabit, they get married, and they live. Nothing criminal about it, but it has created a social problem. The problem of children born of these marriages. Very often, they go away to their lands, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Africa, and now the mother of the children is here. She has to go through what is called the Hague Convention. Very difficult, very hard, and to get your child back. So this is a problem that we have. And perhaps for our own communities, we've had these experiences in our own communities where responsible and good people from India and Pakistan and wherever come and ask for our daughters in marriage. When that time comes, it is prudent. It would be safe to question what will happen in the event of this or that. First of all, if they get married, how will they marry? And if they get married, where will they stay? And if they get married, if there is a divorce, what will happen? Now, one doesn't want to talk about these things at the time of marriage, but it's prudent to do so, because if children are born, there is a problem now. And he hasn't got, the man likely doesn't have, he might have come here on a refugee visa or an employment visa, whatever it is. So yes, it's time in our own communities to reflect upon these things when it happens. It's happening more often than we know, because they have now integrated in our society, isn't it?
Yeah.
Very largely they are Muslim people, they are known to us and they marry. And similarly, I know of instances where South Africans have married people from India and Pakistan and so on, and Bangladesh. So when these situations arrive, advisable and prudent that we look at what will happen if the worst happens, that sort of situation. But it's now widespread, very widespread, and unfortunately not all of it is a happy ending. Happy endings are not always guaranteed. So you have the problems when they can't live together, they have irreconcilable differences. And now when there are children, if he goes back home, he doesn't pay maintenance. So the mother is left here with the child, by which time, very often, and this is something I say with some reservation, girls will marry without their parents' consent, because he's a foreigner and the parents were not happy. But when that happens and there is a breakup, she is now estranged, she is removed from her family, so there are other problems.
Yes.
We will have to learn to cope. As lawyers, we will have this increasingly. It will happen in your practice, it will happen everywhere, and we must know how to handle this when these things happen, deal with it, anticipate what will happen.
Absolutely. Mr. Seda, it's always a pleasure to have you with us. And again, I say thank you for taking the time to be with us this evening.
Pleasure being with you again, once again. All the best to you.
Jazakallah. And that concludes not only today's show, but also the first season of Legal Ease. It has been wonderful to share so much knowledge with you all, and I hope you've benefited from the various shows that have been screened over the last few months. I look forward to seeing you again in future. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.